It was one of those crisp autumn afternoons where the air felt just right, cool enough to pull on a light jacket but warm enough to enjoy walking around. The sun was shining, and the streets buzzed with people going about their day. Among them was a woman in her early 30s who decided to take a break from her busy schedule and indulge in some much-needed me-time. She loved fashion, not because it was flashy or expensive, but because she believed clothes could tell a story. Every stitch, every fabric choice, spoke volumes about creativity and culture. She stopped by an upscale boutique downtown, known for its high-end designer collections. It wasn't the kind of place you visited every week, it was more like a treat-yourself spot reserved for special occasions. As she stepped inside, the store greeted her with soft lighting, sleek displays, and racks filled with beautiful dresses, blouses, and accessories. The sort of place that made you feel like royalty, or at least someone important, even if only for a little while. Dressed casually but stylishly in jeans and a silk blouse, she blended into the crowd effortlessly. She didn't walk in looking for anything specific. Instead, she let her fingers glide over the fabrics as she browsed through the racks. Her eyes landed on a stunning hand-embroidered gown hanging neatly on a rack. The intricate details caught her attention. It looked elegant yet bold, exactly the kind of thing she might wear to an upcoming charity gala. Curious, she turned to ask one of the sales associates about the price. But instead of receiving a friendly smile or helpful response, something strange happened. The associate's expression changed almost instantly. What started as polite indifference quickly morphed into something colder, sharper. There was no warmth in their tone when they replied, "That dress is very exclusive, not everyone can afford it." The comment stung, but she brushed it off, thinking maybe the person was just having a bad day. So, she asked again, this time clarifying what she meant. "Oh, I understand. Could you tell me how much it costs?" But things escalated faster than she expected. The associate snapped back, accusing her of wasting their time and implying she wouldn't be able to afford anything in the store anyway. Shocked, she tried to explain herself, saying she was genuinely interested in learning more about the piece. That's when the manager stepped in, not to smooth things over, but to make matters worse. With arms crossed and a dismissive glare, the manager told her outright, "I think it's best if you leave. You're disrupting our customers." Disrupting? All she had done was ask a simple question. No yelling, no arguing, just curiosity. Yet here she was, being escorted out of the store like she'd committed some crime. As she walked away, humiliation burned in her chest. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Sure, she knew racism existed, it wasn't her first time facing it. But there was something particularly cruel about being treated this way in such a public setting. And the worst part? She hadn't even done anything wrong. By the time she reached the sidewalk outside, her cheeks were flushed and her hands trembled slightly. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down. This wasn't okay. Not even close. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. When the call connected, she didn't waste any time explaining what had happened. On the other end of the line, her husband listened quietly, his voice steady but laced with anger when he finally spoke. "Don't worry," he said firmly. "I'll take care of it." Little did anyone in that boutique know, those words would set off a chain reaction that would change everything, for them, for her, and for countless others who deserved better. The woman stood on the sidewalk outside the boutique, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and disbelief. She replayed the scene in her mind over and over again. The dismissive looks, the cold words, the way they had treated her like she didn't belong, even though she was just another customer looking for something beautiful to wear. It wasn't fair. But deep down she knew this wasn't about her alone. It was about every person who had ever been made to feel small or unworthy because of the color of their skin or how they dressed. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found the number she needed. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should even bother telling him. After all, he worked hard to stay out of the public eye, focusing instead on building his empire quietly behind the scenes. He didn't like drama or attention unless it served a greater purpose, but this was different. This wasn't just about her, it was bigger than that. She dialed the number, and after 2 rings, he picked up. His voice was calm but warm, instantly making her feel a little better. "Hey," he said. "Everything okay?" She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself before speaking. "No," she admitted softly. "Not really." There was a pause. On the other end of the line, she could almost picture him sitting up straighter, his focus shifting completely to her. "What happened?" he asked, his tone sharper now, more alert. She began recounting the story, starting from when she first walked into the boutique. As she spoke, she could hear his breathing change, slowly at first, then heavier, angrier. When she got to the part where the manager told her to leave, his voice cut through hers sharply. "Wait, they kicked you out? Just like that?" She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Yeah, they said I was disrupting them. All I did was ask about a dress." For a long moment there was silence on the other end of the line. She wondered if maybe she shouldn't have called him after all. Maybe this was too much, too personal. But then he spoke again, his voice low but firm. "Where are you now?" "Outside the store," she replied. "Why?" "I'll be there soon," he said simply. "Stay put." Before she could protest, he hung up. She stared at her phone, unsure whether to feel relieved or worried. On one hand, she appreciated having someone who cared so deeply about her. On the other hand, she knew exactly what kind of power he wielded, and that scared her a little. Not because she thought he'd do anything reckless, but because she didn't want him to go out of his way for her. Still, there was no stopping him once he set his mind to something. Less than an hour later, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The driver stepped out, opening the door for him. He climbed out, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed success without being overly flashy. People passing by glanced at him curiously, recognizing the face of someone who rarely appeared in the media but whose name carried weight across industries. To her, though, he was just him. The man who had stood by her side through thick and thin, who believed in her dreams as much as his own. He walked over to her, his expression unreadable. "Are you okay?" he asked, placing a hand on her shoulder. She nodded, though her eyes betrayed the storm still brewing inside her. "I'm fine," she said. "But I hate that this keeps happening. Why does it always have to be like this?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to look at the boutique, his jaw tightening slightly. For a moment, he just stood there, taking it all in, the pristine windows, the expensive displays, the air of exclusivity that reeked of privilege. Then he turned back to her, his gaze softening. "Listen," he said. "You don't deserve to be treated like that. Nobody does. Let me handle this." She opened her mouth to argue, to tell him that it wasn't worth it, that she didn't want him to make a big deal out of it. But before she could say anything, he held up a hand. "Trust me," he said. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about sending a message." With that, he walked toward the boutique, leaving her standing there watching him go. She wanted to follow, to stop him, but something held her back. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was hope. Whatever it was, she stayed put, waiting to see what would happen next. Inside the boutique, the staff went about their business as usual, unaware of the storm about to hit. Customers browsed casually, chatting with sales associates while soft music played in the background. Everything seemed normal, until 2 impeccably dressed men entered the store. They moved with purpose, their presence commanding attention without saying a word. One of them approached the manager, who greeted them with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" she asked, clearly expecting nothing more than another potential sale. The man handed her a folder, his expression unreadable. "We're here on behalf of MC Ventures," he said smoothly. "Effective immediately. This boutique has been acquired." The manager blinked, confused. "Acquired? What do you mean?" "It means," the second man interjected, "that your store is now under new ownership. You'll receive further instructions shortly." The room fell silent as the news sank in. Employees exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to say or do. Customers looked around, equally baffled. Within minutes, signs were placed outside the boutique announcing its temporary closure for restructuring. Social media lit up almost instantly, with people speculating about what had caused such a sudden change. Back on the sidewalk, she watched it all unfold, her heart racing. She hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly. Sure, she knew he had resources and influence, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. And yet, as unsettling as it felt, there was also a strange sense of satisfaction, a quiet reminder that actions have consequences, no matter how powerful or privileged you think you are. When he returned to her side, his expression was calm, but resolute. "It's done," he said simply. She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or regret. But there was none, just determination. "Thank you," she whispered finally, her voice barely audible. He shook his head, pulling her into a hug. "Don't thank me," he murmured. "This isn't over yet." The boutique's temporary closure signs went up faster than anyone could process what was happening. Employees milled around inside, confused and anxious, while customers lingered outside, snapping photos and whispering to each other. Social media erupted with speculation. People posted pictures of the store's now covered windows, tagging influencers and local news outlets in hopes of getting answers. The hashtag Thrasher Boutique Takeover started trending within hours, fueled by a mix of curiosity, outrage, and disbelief. For the woman who had been kicked out earlier, it was surreal to watch everything unfold from a distance. She stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, her mind racing with questions. Sure, she'd expected him to do something, but this was on another level entirely. It wasn't just about shutting down the store, it felt like he was dismantling an entire system that had allowed such behavior to exist in the first place. He noticed her watching silently and stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "I know you're probably wondering why I did this," he said, glancing at her briefly before turning his attention back to the chaos unfolding before them. She nodded slowly, still trying to wrap her head around it all. "Yeah, I mean, this is huge. Bigger than I thought it would be." "It's not just about today," he replied, his tone firm but calm. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened to someone like you, or anyone else who looks like us. And it won't stop unless people start holding these places accountable." His words hit her like a punch to the gut, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. She knew exactly what he meant. Every snide comment, every dismissive glance, every moment of being treated as less than, it all added up. And here he was, taking a stand not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel unwelcome in spaces like this. As the day wore on, the reality of the situation began to sink in for the boutique's staff. 2 representatives from MC Ventures arrived to oversee the transition. They were polite but unyielding, making it clear that changes were coming. Big ones. Employees were called into meetings one by one, their futures hanging in the balance. Some cried openly, realizing they might lose their jobs. Others sat stiffly, too stunned to react. Meanwhile, security footage from the day of the incident was reviewed. There was no denying what had happened. The coldness in the manager's voice, the way the sales associate had dismissed her without a second thought. It was all there in black and white. When the evidence was presented to him later, he didn't hesitate. Everyone involved in her mistreatment was fired immediately. No severance, no second chances. But letting people go wasn't enough. He wanted to send a message, one that went beyond punishment. He brought in a team of diversity consultants to evaluate the boutique's practices from top to bottom. Hiring policies, customer service training, even the layout of the store itself, nothing was off limits. If the boutique was going to reopen, it would have to be completely transformed. Word spread quickly among former employees about the sweeping changes underway. Many were shocked, others furious, but some quietly admitted that maybe, just maybe, they'd deserved it. One former sales associate posted online anonymously saying, "We always acted like the store was better than everyone else. Maybe it's good that someone finally called us out on it while the boutique underwent its overhaul, Buzz grew louder in the community. Local leaders praised the decision to prioritize inclusivity, calling it long overdue. Fashion bloggers speculated about what the revamped store might look like, and aspiring designers hoped it would open doors for underrepresented voices in the industry. For her part, the woman tried to stay grounded despite the whirlwind of attention. She wasn't used to being at the center of anything like this, and honestly, she didn't want to be. But she couldn't deny the impact of what was happening. Friends and acquaintances reached out to share their own stories of being followed around stores, ignored by staff, or outright insulted. Each story broke her heart a little more, but it also reinforced why this mattered so much. One evening, as they sat together at home, she turned to him and asked the question that had been nagging at her since the takeover began. "Do you think this will actually make a difference, or are we just stirring the pot?" He leaned back in his chair, considering her words carefully. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said finally. "But if we don't push back when things like this happen, nothing will ever improve. Sometimes you have to shake things up to get people to pay attention." She nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "I just hope it's worth it." "It will be," he said firmly. "Not just for you, but for everyone who deserves better." Over the next few weeks, plans for the boutique's transformation took shape. Instead of catering exclusively to high-profile clients, the new vision centered around accessibility and representation. Emerging designers from marginalized communities were invited to showcase their work, giving them a platform they'd rarely been afforded before. The store would host workshops, mentorship programs, and events aimed at fostering creativity and breaking down barriers in the fashion world. When the renovations were nearly complete, he surprised her with an invitation to visit the space. "Come see what we've done," he said, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "It's almost ready." At first, she hesitated. Walking back into that building felt daunting, knowing how badly things had gone the last time she was there. But curiosity got the better of her, and eventually she agreed. Stepping inside, she was struck by how different it felt. Gone were the cold, sterile displays that had once dominated the space. In their place were vibrant colors, warm lighting, and artwork created by local artists. Racks of clothing lined the walls, each piece telling a unique story of culture, resilience, and innovation. It was beautiful, not just in appearance, but in spirit. She trailed off, unable to find the right words. "This is amazing." He smiled, watching her take it all in. "It's just the beginning," he said softly. "There's still so much work to do, but if this can inspire even one person to dream bigger, then it'll all be worth it." As she walked through the transformed boutique, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, not just for what had been accomplished, but for the ripple effect it might create. This wasn't just a store anymore. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that change was possible when people refused to stay silent. The day of the boutique's grand reopening arrived, and the buzz in the air was electric. Months of planning, renovating, and reimagining had led to this moment. The once exclusive store now stood as a beacon of inclusivity and creativity, its doors wide open to welcome people from all walks of life. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Curious onlookers, fashion enthusiasts, local leaders, and media crews eager to capture the story behind the transformation. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. This was the same space where she'd been humiliated just months earlier, but now it felt like an entirely different world. The sleek, cold exterior had been replaced with warm tones and bold murals painted by local artists. A large sign above the entrance read, "Elevate," written in elegant script that seemed to promise something greater than just shopping. It promised empowerment. As she made her way inside, she couldn't help but notice how alive the space felt. Gone were the days when customers whispered nervously or tiptoed around expensive displays. Now, laughter filled the air, mingling with the sound of upbeat music playing softly in the background. People moved freely, touching fabrics, admiring designs, and chatting with designers who were present to share their stories. It wasn't just a store anymore. It was a celebration. Her husband joined her shortly after, his expression calm but proud. He didn't say much at first, letting her soak in the atmosphere. But when she finally turned to him, her eyes shining with emotion, He gave her a small nod. "What do you think?" he asked simply. "It's perfect," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I never thought I'd walk back into this place and feel like I belonged." He smiled faintly, though there was seriousness in his gaze. "That's the whole point," he said. "You and everyone else should always feel like you belong here." Later that evening, during the official opening ceremony, he took the stage to address the crowd. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. Dressed in a tailored suit that exuded confidence without trying too hard, he looked every bit the successful entrepreneur he was known to be. But tonight he wasn't speaking as a businessman. He was speaking as someone who believed deeply in fairness and justice. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady and clear. "This isn't just about fashion. It's about making sure everyone is treated with dignity and respect, no matter who they are or where they come from." The audience nodded along, some clapping softly in agreement. He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in before continuing. "A few months ago, my wife walked into a store, not this one, not yet, and was treated in a way no human being should ever be treated. She was dismissed, disrespected, and ultimately kicked out because of assumptions based on nothing more than her appearance." He glanced briefly at her, seated near the front row, and gave her a small smile before turning back to the crowd. "That experience stayed with me. Not because it happened to her specifically, but because it happens to so many others every single day. And it's wrong. Plain and simple." The room erupted in applause, but he held up a hand to quiet them. "So we decided to do something about it. We took over this space not to punish anyone, but to create something better, something meaningful. Tonight, we're launching Elevate, a boutique dedicated to showcasing the work of emerging designers from underrepresented communities. These talented individuals have stories to tell, and we want to give them a platform to share those stories with the world." As he spoke, images of the featured designers flashed on a screen behind him. Each photo was accompanied by a brief description of their journey, the challenges they'd faced, the dreams they'd chased, and the resilience that kept them going. Some in the audience wiped away tears, moved by the raw honesty of it all. "But this is just the beginning," he continued. "We're also introducing mentorship programs, workshops, and partnerships aimed at breaking down barriers in the fashion industry. Because talent shouldn't be limited by privilege or circumstance, everyone deserves a chance to shine." By the time he finished speaking, the room was buzzing with energy. People cheered, clapped, and even whistled in appreciation. When he stepped off the stage, she rushed to him, throwing her arms around him in a tight hug. "That was incredible," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He hugged her back, his grip firm but gentle. "It's easy to talk about change," he murmured, "but real progress comes from action. This is just one step, a small one, but it's ours." Over the next few hours, guests wandered through the boutique, marveling at the intricate designs and meeting the creators behind them. One designer, a young woman with braids adorned with colorful beads, shared her story with anyone who would listen. "I've been sewing since I was a kid," she said, her eyes sparkling with pride. "But I never thought anyone would take me seriously until now. Being here feels like a dream." Another designer, an older man with kind eyes and calloused hands, explained how he used traditional techniques passed down through generations to create modern pieces. "Fashion isn't just about looking good," he said. "It's about preserving culture, telling history, and inspiring the future." Every conversation, every interaction added another layer to the evening's magic. For the woman who had once been turned away, it was overwhelming in the best possible way. She wandered from display to display, taking it all in, feeling a sense of pride swell within her. This wasn't just a victory for her, it was a victory for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. As the night wound down, she found herself standing near the entrance, watching people leave with bags in hand and smiles on their faces. Her husband joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "Feels good, doesn't it?" he asked quietly. She nodded, leaning into him. "More than I can put into words." They stood there together for a while, watching the lights flicker and fade as the crowd dispersed. The boutique was officially open, but the work was far from over. Still, they both knew they had taken a step toward something bigger, a future where places like this weren't the exception, but the norm. Months had passed since the grand reopening of Elevate, and the boutique had become more than just a store. It was a movement. Word spread quickly about the space that celebrated creativity, diversity, and inclusion, drawing people from all corners of the city and beyond. What started as a bold statement against discrimination had transformed into something far greater, a platform for underrepresented voices to shine. For her, the woman who had once been humiliated in that very same building, life had taken on new meaning. The incident at the boutique could have left her feeling bitter or defeated, but instead it ignited a fire within her. She realized she had an opportunity, not just to heal herself, but to help others heal too. So, she threw herself into mentoring young entrepreneurs, particularly those from marginalized communities, guiding them through the challenges of navigating industries still plagued by systemic barriers. Every week, she hosted workshops at Elevate, inviting aspiring designers, artists, and business owners to share their dreams and struggles. Sitting in a circle with notebooks in hand, they talked openly about rejection letters, skeptical investors, and the constant battle to prove themselves worthy. She listened intently, offering advice not just as someone who'd faced similar obstacles, but as someone who understood what it felt like to be underestimated. "You deserve to be here," she often told them, her voice steady and sincere. "Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." Her husband watched from afar, proud of how she channeled her pain into purpose. He knew how hard she worked, how much energy she poured into lifting others up, and he couldn't have been prouder. But he also saw the bigger picture. This wasn't just about one boutique or one group of people. It was about creating lasting change across entire systems. Inspired by her dedication, he expanded his own efforts to support minority-owned businesses through MC Ventures. He launched a series of initiatives aimed at leveling the playing field for entrepreneurs who lacked access to resources. There were grants for startups, mentorship programs connecting seasoned professionals with newcomers, and networking events designed to foster collaboration rather than competition. Local leaders praised him for using his wealth and influence to drive meaningful progress, while aspiring business owners thanked him for giving them opportunities they'd long been denied. But perhaps the most powerful impact came from the stories shared by those who benefited from these changes. A young man named Carlos, whose family ran a small tailor shop in a struggling neighborhood, credited Elevate with helping him turn his passion for sustainable fashion into a thriving brand. Another woman, a single mother named Tina, spoke tearfully about how the boutique's mentorship program gave her the confidence to launch her jewelry line after years of doubting herself. "These are the moments that remind me why we're doing this," she said one evening as she and her husband sat together at home. They had just finished reviewing feedback from participants in the latest workshop, and her eyes sparkled with pride. "It's not just about fixing what went wrong, it's about building something better for everyone." He nodded, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "You've always had this ability to see the good in people even when they can't see it in themselves. It's inspiring." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I didn't always feel this way, you know. For a long time, I let things like that day at the boutique define me. But now I realize my worth isn't determined by someone else's opinion, and neither is anyone else's." Their conversation shifted to the future, the next steps for Elevate and MC Ventures. They dreamed big, imagining a world where stores like this weren't rare exceptions but common fixtures in every community, where children grew up seeing themselves represented in every industry, knowing they belonged without question. It was ambitious, sure, but neither of them shied away from dreaming. As the weeks turned into months, Elevate continued to thrive. Customers visited not just to shop, but to connect, to feel seen and heard in a way many hadn't experienced before. The boutique hosted art exhibits, poetry readings, and panel discussions, each event drawing larger crowds than the last. People came from all walks of life, united by a shared desire for progress and understanding. One afternoon, she found herself standing near the entrance, watching a young girl wander wide-eyed through the displays. The child tugged at her mother's sleeve, pointing excitedly at a dress adorned with intricate embroidery. "Look, Mama, that's so pretty." The mother smiled, nodding as she knelt down to explain the story behind the design. Watching the exchange, she felt a lump rise in her throat. This was what it was all about, moments like these where people could walk into a space and feel inspired, valued, and included. Later that evening, she shared the moment with her husband. "Do you remember what it felt like walking into that store the first time?" she asked, her tone thoughtful. "How cold and unwelcoming it seemed." He nodded, his expression somber. "I'll never forget it." "Well," she continued, a small smile tugging at her lips, "today I saw a little girl look at one of our dresses and light up like it was magic. That's the difference we've made. That's what matters." They sat in silence for a while, letting the weight of her words settle between them. Neither needed to say anything more. They both knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Change rarely was. But they also knew they weren't alone. Together, along with the countless individuals they'd touched, they were building something extraordinary, and that was enough. The months rolled by, and Elevate became more than just a boutique. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and progress. People from all over the city visited not only to shop, but to experience something deeper, a sense of belonging. The store's walls seemed to hum with stories of designers who had been told they weren't good enough, customers who finally felt seen, and employees who were learning to see the world through new eyes. For her, the woman at the center of it all, life had shifted in ways she never could have imagined. What started as a painful memory had turned into a catalyst for change, not just in her own life, but in the lives of countless others. She often found herself reflecting on how far they'd come since that fateful day when she was kicked out of the very same building. Back then, she had walked away feeling small, dismissed, and invisible. Now, every time she stepped into Elevate, and she carried herself with quiet confidence, knowing she had played a part in transforming pain into purpose. Her husband noticed the shift in her too. Gone was the hesitation she used to feel when speaking up about injustice or inequality. Instead, she approached every challenge with determination, using her voice to amplify those who hadn't yet found theirs. Whether it was mentoring young entrepreneurs, giving speeches at community events, or simply sharing her story with strangers, she did it all with authenticity and grace. One evening, as they sat together on their balcony overlooking the city lights, he broke the comfortable silence between them. "You know," he said, his tone thoughtful, "when this whole thing started, I thought it would end once we fixed what happened to you. But now, it feels like we're just getting started." She smiled, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah, me too. At first I thought shutting down the boutique and reopening it was enough, but then I realized this isn't just about one store or one moment. It's about creating spaces where people can thrive without having to fight for their place." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "And that's why I've been thinking, what if we took this further?" She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Further? What do you mean?" "Well," he began, turning to face her, "we've done great work with Elevate, but there are still so many industries where people are excluded because of who they are or where they come from. Imagine if we expanded these initiatives, beyond fashion, beyond retail. What if we created opportunities for underrepresented voices in tech, art, education, even politics?" Her eyes widened as she processed his words. "You're talking about a movement." "Exactly," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "A movement that doesn't stop at one boutique or one industry. A movement that says you matter, your voice matters. And we start by showing people exactly how much power they have to make a difference." Over the next few weeks, they began laying the groundwork for something bigger, a foundation dedicated to empowering marginalized communities across multiple fields. They called it Rise Together, a name that reflected their belief in collective progress. Through grants, scholarships, and partnerships, they aimed to break down barriers that had long kept talented individuals from reaching their full potential. Word of Rise Together spread quickly, drawing attention from activists, educators, and business leaders alike. Local schools partnered with the foundation to provide mentorship programs for students interested in STEM careers. Art galleries hosted exhibitions featuring works by emerging artists from underserved neighborhoods. Tech companies eager to diversify, their teams reached out for guidance on inclusive hiring practices. But perhaps the most rewarding aspect of Rise Together was seeing the impact it had on individuals. One young man named Elijah, who had grown up in foster care, credited the foundation with helping him secure an internship at a major engineering firm. Another woman, Maria, shared how a scholarship allowed her to pursue her dream of becoming a teacher despite financial hardships. Each success story fueled their determination to keep pushing forward. At Elevate, the spirit of inclusivity continued to flourish. The boutique wasn't just a hub for fashion anymore. It had become a gathering place for anyone seeking inspiration or connection. On any given day, you might find a local poet hosting a reading, a group of teenagers sketching designs for their first clothing line, or a panel discussion on topics ranging from mental health to environmental sustainability. One afternoon, she stood near the entrance, watching as a crowd gathered for a special event, a showcase featuring pieces created by students from a nearby art school. As the young designers introduced their work, explaining the meaning behind each stitch and brushstroke, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with pride. These were the future changemakers, the ones who would carry the torch long after she and her husband were gone. After the event, she lingered behind to chat with some of the attendees. A middle-aged woman approached her, tears glistening in her eyes. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said softly. "My daughter came here last year, unsure of whether she belonged in this industry. Seeing her grow and gain confidence has been incredible. You've changed her life, and mine." She felt a lump rise in her throat but managed to smile. "It's not me you should thank," she replied gently. "It's everyone who's worked hard to make this space what it is. We're all in this together." As the days turned into years, Elevate and Rise Together grew side by side, each fueling the other's mission. The boutique remained a cornerstone of the community, while the foundation expanded its reach, touching lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. Together, they proved that real change didn't happen overnight, but it was worth fighting for. Late one night, as they sat together in the quiet comfort of their home, she turned to him with a soft smile. "Do you remember how scared I was that day at the boutique?" she asked. He chuckled, shaking his head. "How could I forget? You looked like you wanted to disappear." "I did," she admitted, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "But look at us now. Look at everything we've built, all because we refused to stay silent." He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "We didn't do this alone," he reminded her. "Every person who walked through those doors, every designer who trusted us with their vision, every customer who chose to support this movement, they're the reason we're here." She nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You're right. This isn't our story. It's theirs." And as they sat there, hand in hand, they knew they had only scratched the surface. There was still so much work to be done, so many voices, waiting to be heard. But for now, they were content knowing they had started something beautiful, something that would continue to grow and inspire for generations to come.